Almost 4 years ago, President Obama announced his vision for high-speed rail to be funded with $8 billion in economic stimulus funds. It was the most sweeping investment in our infrastructure since President Eisenhower built the interstate highway system in the 1950s. Sounds great, right? Who doesn't like the idea of super-fast trains connecting America, creating jobs, helping end gridlock, and supposedly helping our environment? Not everybody, evidently. What is the state of high-speed rail in the United States? How will it change our lives? And will high-speed rail end air travel as we know it? A lot of questions. Joining us to discuss all of them, Michael Melaniphy, President of the American Public Transportation Association, Andy Kunz, President and CEO of the U.S. High-Speed Rail Association. In Chicago, we have Jonathan Kletzel, U.S. Transportation and Logistics Leader with PricewaterhouseCoopers. And in New York, we have our HuffPost travel editor, Andrew Burmon. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Andrew, let me start with you. Remind us of President Obama's plan, where the $8 billion has come from, and how it's been spent so far. Andy, rather, sorry.
The money has been divided up amongst a number of different corridors around the country. There's a range of projects that they're funding, from state-of-the-art high-speed rail, 220-mile-an-hour trains, down to repairs and fixing of existing Amtrak systems. So the money has gone to probably 30 or 40 projects throughout the country in that range. At the high-end range, the one that's about to go to construction is the California project, an 800-mile system covering the whole state of California. That's the big one that we're most excited about. But there's a number of others of upgrades and improvements and things to existing rail systems throughout the country. Some of them are already done, some are under construction now, and others are in the planning stages. So it's quite a wide range of projects that are initiated with this.
And Andy, your organization, the U.S. High-Speed Rail Association, has put together this map. I want to refresh my computer so we can all take a look at it. It's an animation. Talk us through what we're looking at. This is the sort of the time frame under which all of these plans are supposed to be put into action and completed.
We launched this map when we launched the association as a way to show the nation how this could evolve over time and how we could build out a complete, integrated, connected system throughout the country. And so what we did is we started with the largest cities in the busiest corridors as the first phase, which more or less followed the president's plan of the first few phases. And then we took it the next step and the next step and the next step of how it would evolve past that to a full build out. And so that's what that map shows over a 30-year span, building out the entire country with high-speed rail, and starting in the most logical places where you'll get the highest ridership, all the way up to connecting the whole nation over those years. And
Michael, my understanding is you and Andy both had a meeting today with the U.S. Department of Transportation, and you got an update on the current status of high-speed rail. What did you hear today?
Well, thank you. It was a great opportunity. The Secretary LaHood brought us together for a meeting, a group of thought leaders, along with the FRA Administrator Joe Szabo and many other members of the DOT and FRA administrations. And the idea there was to talk about how do we go to the next stage? What's the next level as we move forward with high-speed rail in this country? And what are our visions both for now and for the next 25 years, and how can we get there?
Andrew, let me start with you, or let me come back to you, and I want to ask you about sort of how and why the Obama administration decided to push high-speed rail as a policy proposal in the first place, particularly when they got the stimulus money allocated for it. And do you think that they bit off more than they could chew?
I mean, it would appear that they did, given the fact that they were not getting all of the money. They've lost $1.5 billion recently in funding. But I think Andy is probably the one to better handle this question, quite honestly.
All right, Andy, go ahead.
State the question one more time, please.
Did the Obama administration bite off more than they could chew?
I don't think so at all. In fact, I get, so your original part of your question was, why did they do this? I think that President Obama was probably one of the most visionary presidents to come along in a long time to see the great value of rail and high-speed rail and to launch the program. I mean, these systems have been in operation all over the rest of the world for almost 50 years. So this is not something new. It's not experimental. These are proven systems to work, and they're highly successful everywhere they're built. In terms of biting off more than you could chew, I don't think so at all. I think there was a learning curve for sure to get up to speed from an administration and agencies that had not been doing high-speed rail to date to suddenly start doing it. I mean, that takes some catching up and getting up to speed on the knowledge and all that. But I think they've done quite a good job at spreading the money around the country and getting the entire country fired up in favor of high-speed rail. I think that was probably the best thing they accomplished in this first round. Now, the second round, I think we're going to have to really focus more money, larger amounts of money in specific corridors to get some of these systems. They have to get to completion so people can actually ride the trains to see the great value. If they're just under construction or in planning, people don't actually get to feel them and ride them and actually see the benefits that they offer.
And I think that that's a good point. And once the California project starts to get off the ground, it'll be a little bit more of a tangible thing because, you know, we've been hearing about high-speed rail for so long, yet we haven't really seen it in the United States. Andrew, let me go back to you because you travel a lot. You know, you probably think in terms of, you know, how much money it costs to get from A to B. Is high-speed rail going to make travel more affordable, do you think, for most Americans?
Well, we really don't know how much it's going to cost yet. The fact is, the more competition there is in terms of travel from point A to point B, the cheaper getting from point A to point B will likely become. What it will do certainly is offer a viable alternative to flying, and flying can be a real issue for a lot of people. Flying's become very, very unpleasant, and I'm thinking particularly of not me so much as my grandmother, who has a really hard time getting on planes. The whole process is terrible for her. Trains would be wonderful for our nation's elderly.
Let's take a look at, I'm going to take a look at a simulation from NC3D of the high-speed train. And this is the one that we hope to get here in California. Let's take a look at this piece of footage right now. And while we do, I want to ask you, Jonathan, tell me a little bit about what the actual experience will be like for people on these trains. What are, you know, we're looking at how fast it would take to get from Southern California to Northern California. What's the actual experience going to be like?
Well, again, this is probably a comment better for Andy, but you know, certainly if you're comparing it to air travel, you know, my understanding is it's going to be you know, more consistent in terms of, you know, getting from point A to point B, you know, on a reliable time frame. It's going to be depending on the type of class you're in, actually probably in any class you're in, it's going to be more comfortable form of travel. You know, in terms of speed, it'll really depend on I think the distance from city center to city center, or from you know, point A to point B, whether there's additional travel that you have to take to get to where you're going beyond just the air, you know, the flight or the train.
In terms of how this is going to affect the airline industry, it seems sort of logical to think about that maybe on a regional level, like the Northeast Corridor, where the train service is you know, pretty heavy. Regionally, is it fair to say that it'll affect air travel, but probably across the country, like the transcontinental flights, it may not affect as much?
Yeah, I think it will be regional for sure. It will depend on which region you're talking about, what the impact will be. I think if you look at the West Coast, there's certainly quite a bit of opportunity to potentially displace some air travel that goes on up and down the West Coast between Seattle, San Francisco, San Diego, and LA. If you look at the Northeast Corridor, I think what you'll see is actually, depending on how it's deployed in the future, a very nice complement to air travel. So, you know, if you can get it to where you can really make it seamless for passengers to transfer between, you know, an international flight from Europe into, say, New York, and then get, you know, from New York to Boston very easily, I think you'll see a nice complement there. When you're looking at, you know, maybe the Southeast region and the, you know, maybe Texas, I don't know that you're going to see as much of an impact there, other than for a handful of routes. I mean, the U.S. domestic air transport system has, you know, a couple of thousand routes, and you're talking about maybe impacting, you know, 20 or 30 routes with high-speed rail.
Andrew, what do you think is going to be the main draw for people in terms of picking a high-speed train over an airplane?
Well, likely it will be price, but beyond that, I mean, there are a lot of other things as well. Riding a train is actually just a really pleasant activity.
Yeah, it sure is.
The way travel works now, you basically suffer through some unpleasantness, to go someplace nice, and then you suffer through some unpleasantness again. And with trains, you have this opportunity to not only go someplace, but to see towns along the way. And there are many beautiful little towns in America along the rails that people quite simply do not see. I've gone across the country on trains, and it's fantastically beautiful. It's really easy to forget how beautiful some of this country is because we just don't see it. We fly over it.
We sure do, and I love riding a train as well. Michael, it looked like you had wanted to jump in a minute earlier. I want to give you the chance to do so.
Thank you. I think one of the things to think about here is this isn't about one mode versus another. It's talking about a transportation system of providing people with options. As we look at what's happening in this country, we're going to have 100 million more people in this country by 2050. We have to figure out the most appropriate way to move them about this country to ensure that we have the efficient and effective movement of goods, services, and commerce. So this is just one of those components. And so for certain market segments, an airplane's the best choice. For some segments, high-speed rail's a great choice. For others, it could be commuter buses, transit, cars, bicycles. It's the right mix for the right mode. And for each trip, I might take a different type of mode to supply the best and most efficient, cost-effective trip.
You know, the buzzword today is jobs, as we talk about what's going to get the American economy back on the right track. And again, these funds came originally from the economic stimulus. How many jobs will high-speed rail create, Michael, in the United States?
You're going to have jobs all over the place. For every dollar invested, there's $4 in economic benefit. And we see up to 24,000 jobs for every $1 billion invested. You have to remember that a lot of the investment from the federal side is in capital. And capital flows through to the private sector that's building those trains and putting the infrastructure in place. So this creates jobs in the private sector and provides opportunity. The real value capture here has to do with the development along the rail corridors. As you put high-speed rail in, you build restaurants and hotels and businesses all around those nodes, and you more efficiently and effectively build the development around there. And we've already seen, even with commuter and transit corridors, some of the most resilient real estate has to do around the fixed guideway corridors.
You know, you mentioned one of the upsides, obviously, we're talking about jobs. Another one that people advocate for is the environment and what these trains will do for the environment. But I want to push back a little bit, and Andy, maybe I'll go to you on this one. Some argue these trains are better for the environment, but not everybody. Aren't these trains still running on electricity that requires fossil fuels in order to operate them?
Well, it doesn't have to be generated by fossil fuels. The beauty of electric trains is that as you scale up renewable energy, you can convert more and more of the electricity generated by renewable energy so that eventually, we can have a completely green transportation system, whereas that's not possible with airplanes or with cars or buses or trucks. I mean, they all are running on fuel that can't be just easily switched out to an electric system. I mean, you can obviously make electric cars, but, for a nationwide system to be powered by electricity is amazingly not only efficient but green as you can get.
Hey Andy, let's put some numbers to that. The International Union of Railways out of Paris represents high-speed rail operators around the country, around the world, and their data shows that high-speed rail is 8 times more energy efficient than airplanes and 4 times more energy efficient than automobile use.
And that's not even really looking at whether the electricity is generated by renewable or not. That's even a further benefit if it's renewable.
Exactly.
Let's continue to talk about what this is going to be like for people that are actually going to be aboard these trains, what the experience is going to be like. And maybe, Michael, you're the best one to speak to this, or Andy as well. Et cetera, watching us live right now in the comments says, I personally don't like flying. Oh, sorry. There's another comment I want to bring up from et cetera. The bullet trains in Japan were awesome. I thought it was more comfortable, legroom, less hassle, and cheaper. Is it fair to say that in the United States, Michael, this is going to be more comfortable, less hassle, and cheaper than flying on a regional flight?
Oh, absolutely. When you think about our rural air service, we're very grateful to have it. It provides important connections, but by definition, it's on very small and cramped planes. In December, I had the opportunity to take high-speed rail both in France and in Spain. And a good example, I went from Madrid to Valencia. It's a distance of 180 miles or 300 kilometers. We did that in an hour. Big, wide, comfortable seats, food trays. We had real dinnerware with glasses and silverware, and you could have red wine and it wouldn't even shake. It was very smooth, and you could plug your items, run electrical power as well. a very, very pleasant experience, much nicer even than first class on airlines.
Jonathan, as a consultant to the industry, what's the biggest upside? I mean, what is the biggest selling point for consumers in America in terms of telling them to get on these trains, to have faith, to not be disappointed in what some see as the slow pace of high-speed rail being rolled out across the country?
Right. Well, again, I think it's going to come down to whether or not it's going to get you to your destination either cheaper or faster or more comfortable. And in many cases, that it will do that. In some cases, it won't. And when it doesn't, flying will continue to be there to provide transcontinental service and international service that is a long ways from being replaced by train travel.
And finally, before we go, Andrew, I want to ask you about security. We've seen bullet trains derail in Japan. Another aspect of security is obviously the TSA, which I'm sure you have a ton of experience with traveling all over the place. Nikon in the comments says, and excuse me for the blunt nature of the comment, it's only a matter of time before TSA is molesting little old ladies boarding trains. It only takes one moron to ruin it for all of us. Do you anticipate seeing the federal government put the TSA on these type of trains? And, what's security going to look like? Do we have any idea what to expect?
I don't think we know exactly what to expect, but I do think it's fair to assume that we're going to take security on these trains very seriously. I doubt it would look very much like the TSA. I think the government is smart enough to know that it's their least popular administration, probably. Nobody has anything nice to say about the TSA.
Other than Congress, probably, just in general.
Yeah, exactly. And so I imagine that they'll come up with smarter ways to do it. And it is different than flying. Trains are not going to fall out of the sky, and they can't be redirected. So the nature of the security will be different. But yeah, there will be security involved, and there should be. That's the responsible thing to do.
And Michael and Andy, maybe is the TSA going to be in charge of security for these high-speed trains?
Well, no, the Manette Transportation Institute is already working on this, and they're already, looked at all the high-speed systems around the world and how they do security and the actual threats that are much smaller. There's no fuel on board that can blow up. As we just mentioned, you can't crash the train into something because it's on a fixed guideway. So the potential for danger just doesn't exist from these. But what I was going to say was Spain already had a bomb blow up on a train in some suitcases. And what they have now is in Madrid, when you board the train, you drop your bag on a belt. It goes through a machine. You walk around the other side, you pick it up and you go. There's no scanning of your body or making you empty your pockets or take your shoes off. But they do scan every single bag, and there's not even any line to do it. It took 2 seconds and you got right on the train. So that's the big risk, if any risk exists in this, is that you could actually carry luggage on board with bombs in them, but you can only do a certain amount of damage with that. So if they scan the bags, then that solves that.
Now, just finally, Jonathan, let's be honest. A lot of people look at the map, Andy's map, and they say 2030, that's a long way away, but this thing is never going to even happen by 2030. Is it realistic to think we're going to have high-speed rail during, our lifetimes that will be a complete full system in the United States?
I suspect we'll see high-speed rail be successful in some of these regions. Whether I'll see it in my lifetime across the country, it's hard to say. There's a lot of challenges ahead, both local, regional, national, economic. It's technological, et cetera. But I think we'll see some of that rail come to fruition in our lifetime.
Well, we got.
I think.
How it would.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
The biggest challenge is political. That's the only challenge, because this is not a technical issue. China has already proven that they can build 10,000 miles of high-speed rail in about 5 years. So, and Spain is doing the same thing. So it's not a technical issue. It's political, which will then unleash the funds to pay for it.
Well, I think it's certainly something that the commenters, we've got over 190 comments at this point in this segment, and it's something that our commenters and the HuffPost Live community is certainly eager to see, I think, happen. It's definitely an alternative to the crappy delays, inconveniences that we have to go through with air travel. So, here's hoping that something comes together and that we can have a great alternative to having to fly around and getting frisked up just about every time we get on an airplane. So, Michael, Andy, Jonathan, Andrew, thank you all so much for being here, and keep us posted. Definitely eager to see how this all plays out.
Thank you, Jacob.
All right, guys. Stick around, everybody. We got more HuffPost Live coming up. Thanks for all the great comments. The conversation continues as always. We'll be right back.